The Holy Gospel according to Mark, the 9th chapter.
Glory to you, O Lord.
6 days later, Jesus took with him Peter and James and John and led them up a high mountain apart by themselves. And he was transfigured before them, and his clothes became dazzling white, such as no one on earth could bleach them. And there appeared to them Elijah with Moses, who were talking with Jesus. Then Peter said to Jesus, "Rabbi, it is good for us to be here. Let us make 3 dwellings, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." He did not know what to say, for they were terrified. Then a cloud overshadowed them, and from the cloud there came a voice, "This is my Son, the beloved. Listen to him." Suddenly, when they looked around, they saw no one with them anymore, but only Jesus. As they were coming down the mountain, he ordered them to tell no one about what they had seen until after the Son of Man had risen from the dead. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
Well, if you were here last week, I think you would think all I do these days is watch TV. But this week, I had the chance to watch the opening ceremonies of the Olympics. Anyone else? A few more this time. I'm not a huge Olympics fan, but it feels like the opening ceremonies are always something that you kind of have to watch if you're not doing anything else, because it seems like everyone else is, but maybe not. I don't know. In the commentary by the announcers during it, I remember them mentioning that the production of these opening ceremonies took 2.5 years to create and to develop. 2.5 years to tell a story about their country. If this had been an event for just a smaller group of people, or maybe even just their country of South Korea, I imagine they wouldn't have put near as much time into it as they would have, knowing that they were going to be on the world stage. That's where they were, the world stage. They knew that people from all around the globe were watching, and so they put an immense amount of effort into creating something that would tell their story. So if you watched it, you know it was a story of their country, of their culture, of the people of South Korea. It was a story that dug into the roots of their history, celebrating the things that are unique to their culture, recognizing who they are now in the present, and looking forward to what is to come. This was a chance for the South Korean people to tell the story of who they are. To me, that's what this season in the church year is to be about. The season of Epiphany has so much wrapped into it. We start with the Christmas and the story of Jesus being born into this world as God in the flesh, and have that push us into this story of Jesus' early ministry. His baptism by John, God's voice claiming him as a beloved son, Jesus calling his first disciples, Jesus showing up in towns and synagogues to teach and preach and heal. All of those things along the way have begged the question of us that we have asked again and again, who is this guy? What has he come to do? And what are we supposed to do because of it? And then we get into today's gospel story, which we know admittedly happens much later in Mark's gospel, where we have Jesus taking these few disciples up a mountain and putting on his own show that would rival any Olympic opening ceremonies. Jesus is transfigured before them. His clothes change colors. Prophets of old magically appear out of nowhere, talking with Jesus as if they're old friends. A cloud comes and overshadows them, and once again they hear God's voice. This time not only declaring who Jesus is, but with a command. Listen to him. I wonder if it was the sound of like a mother's voice. Listen to him! As you can imagine, it was enough to bring both terror and amazement to these disciples. Rabbi, it is good for us to be here. Can we stay? Pretty please? I mean, that's the kind of thing we hear in church, right? Oh, the service is over already? Can we stay longer? I mean, I drove through the ice and snow just to get here. I hear that all the time. The experience of the disciples on the mountaintop, that worked because it told the disciples the story of who Jesus, their rabbi, truly is. He is the Son of God. He is a prophet of such importance that even Moses and Elijah came and stood in his presence. He is someone that God wants us to listen to. What a revelation that was. What a story. But then, as it seems to happen with all great stories, the time came for them to come back down the mountain. That always happens, doesn't it? I mean, we're really good at telling a story when we're on a mountaintop. We're really good at hearing and believing a story when we're on a mountaintop, when you have that once-in-a-lifetime event or have that incredible once-in-a-lifetime moment. I bet anyone here who's attended, anyone who attended those opening ceremonies has a great appreciation for the Korean culture. I know that anyone who is here, who has attended a youth gathering in their lifetime, takes home an experience of God that they wouldn't have experienced any other time. But what about the rest of that time? What happens all the rest of the time? I think it's safe to say for us that our dream is for us to come to church and then leave having been changed. I imagine that our dream would be that anytime we experience God, we leave this experience a changed person. I imagine that we hope that anytime we do something in the name of God, that something changes someone or something else. But the problem seems to be that we're not always on top of that mountain when we find ourselves in these situations. We don't have 2.5 years to prepare this event, or not to mention the budget that they had for such an event that nearly the whole world gets to see. As I've heard many of you lament, the opportunity for a youth gathering only comes around once or maybe twice in a lifetime. Unless there's a lot more that I need to learn about you, I haven't heard any of you talking about the trip up the mountain with Jesus himself to experience firsthand the power of God. So what is our story? How do we experience it? And how do we tell it? I think one thing this story from today's gospel shows us is that life is filled with ups and downs. We have those moments where we're at the top of the mountain, experiencing all the awesomeness that God and this world have to offer. And we have those moments where we're in our lowest valleys, experiencing the worst things that this world can dish out to us. And we have all kinds of moments in between those two places. Yet no matter where we are on this journey, the story we get to tell is that God is present with us in all of those places. We saw God's presence with those disciples when they were at the top of the mountain, but Jesus was also the one who had to lead them back down to the mountain, back down the mountain, back to join the other disciples, and since we know the rest of the story, back to this journey that led to his suffering and death. Through all of those things, God was there. If there's no other story that we can tell, couldn't that story be enough? That God is present in all that we face, on our highest mountain, in our lowest valley, in every experience in between. Shouldn't that story change us? Just like Jesus was transfigured, his clothes became dazzling white, such as no one on earth could bleach them, brighter than a Tide commercial. We should be changed inside and out, knowing that God is with us. No more waiting around for God to give us some reason for why something bad happened, but instead realizing and knowing that God was with us through that terrible experience, not causing it, but comforting us through it. Shouldn't that change us? No more thinking about that God is only this incredibly awesome, is only in these incredibly awesome mountaintop experiences, but is also in the mundane and ordinary stuff that can become absolutely holy if we just see it in that way. We should be changed by this stuff. All of that connects back to our baptism, too. There's a deep tradition of wearing white at your baptism, and I think part of that is related to this experience of Jesus' transfiguration. I don't know if you know, in the ancient church, it was customary for young children to be baptized naked. They were put into the water, and when they came out, they were wrapped in a white robe to signify this new belief of who they now were. I don't know if you know, it was also customary for adults to do the same thing. Probably didn't have near as many adult baptisms back then as they would. But this is why pastors, other than today, and assisting ministers and acolytes and confirmands and so many others wear white robes in worship. Great day to skip, I know. But it shows us that all that other stuff is set aside. And what truly matters is our baptismal identity. I mean, wouldn't it be cool if we had a rack right outside the worship space full of white robes, and when you came in, you put one of those on? Every single person here. So that would be the only identity that shapes us in this moment. Wouldn't that be cool? I think it would be cool. We are changed people. We are changed people. We have a specific identity and calling because of what happened with Jesus, not only in the manger, but in the river and in the wilderness and on the mountaintop and on that cross. We have been shaped by a story, and because of all of that, we have a story to tell. Let's go tell that story. Amen.